Washington Journal continues.
We want to welcome back to our table Congressman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma. So let's begin with the news. House Speaker John Boehner sends a proposal to the White House yesterday, his counterbid, as it's being called. What do you think?
You know, I think it's a great opening start. It makes very tangible what the Speaker committed to after the election, which is we're going to put revenue on the table. So that question is settled, and we're now talking about how much and what way. But that is an enormous step forward, honestly, by the Republicans, or concessions. It's not something we want to do, but it's something we recognize we have to do to get there. Second, I think the Speaker's proposal directs us toward what some of the real problems are, which are really entitlement spending. That's what's driving the debt, and we can't pussyfoot around it. You can't solve this with just revenue. You've got to have fundamental and real reform. And while we like the Ryan budget, and I still think that would be the appropriate way to go, the Speaker basically picked up elements of some of the proposals that Erskine Bowles and Senator Simpson had made, and I think, again, in an effort to try and reach towards. So I think the Speaker needs to get a lot of credit for a terrific effort and a great opening position in what now hopefully will be a productive discussion.
So loopholes and deductions, does that violate the Grover Norquist pledge to not raise taxes?
Well, you know, it's not up to me to decide what violates and what doesn't, but I don't think so. You know, I think keeping tax rates where they are is the real question here. And you can increase revenue without increasing tax rate, partly by that, partly, honestly, just a more efficient system redistributes investments away from non-productive loopholes toward things that actually generate economic growth. And that's something that Paul Ryan, of course, has been a leading advocate of. So, again, I think this is a really smart, good proposal by the Speaker, and I was very pleased to see every Republican sign off on it. It wasn't just his name. I think that's extremely significant. I think hopefully the White House understands that means there's unity at the Republican leadership table, and if there's unity there, I can assure you there's unity in the Republican conference.
Yeah, here's a copy of the letter sent to the White House with the signatures of the leadership team, including Paul Ryan, the chairman of the Budget Committee. A lot of our callers have talked about the lack of details in this proposal. What loopholes, deductions do you get rid of in order to bring in more revenue?
Again, there's a interesting debate and discussion on that, and that's really for the negotiators. You know, the easiest single way to do it would just be simply cap the dollar amount and let the individual pick and choose which deductions they want to use. You could also, and the administration has talked favorably about this, or at least some figures associated with it, look at a percent of a person's income that you could, use toward deductions as well. Either of those things seems to me are a lot easier than going through line item by line item. Now, if you start doing line item by line item, there's some obvious candidates, I think, but they're going to have their cast of defenders as well. So,
were you given a copy of this proposal before it was put out there?
No, that's between the leadership and obviously the Democrats. So I saw it at the same time everybody else did.
So only leadership has seen this proposal. The rank and file of the Republican caucus has not seen it.
No, they haven't. Well, they have by now, but they weren't consulted or brought in that sense. And look, you can't negotiate with 240 people in the room. I think we recognize that. But I think the proposal the Speaker put out is very consistent with what most Republicans believe.
So Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, had this reaction. The bad news about this proposal is that it is a tax increase, and I'm not going to vote for a tax increase because it hurts economic growth. He has a lot of people, a lot of conservative Republicans as part of the Republican Study Committee, including yourself. So does Speaker Boehner have the votes for his proposal?
I think the real question in the end will be, does the president have the votes? Because the Speaker put some things out there in terms of entitlements that Democrats are wailing and screaming about can't be part of it, and yet all of them privately will tell you they understand what's driving the deficit more than any single thing, or Medicare, Medicaid, and long-term Social Security. So the mere fact that we're discussing those type of things is good. In terms of the votes, look, if it's going to be a deal, there's going to have to be votes from both sides. The reality is, and these two guys, the president and the Speaker, have dealt with one another before. We act as if they've never been able to come to a deal. They came to a huge deal during the lame duck session in 2010 on extending the Bush tax cuts. They came to another big deal without shutting down the government in April of 2011, cutting discretionary spending by billions of dollars. They came to another one on the debt ceiling deal as well, which was a $2.2 trillion long-term reduction in exchange for an increase in the debt ceiling. So, they need to take it to another level. This is a bigger, more complex problem, and it's the beginning of a series of negotiations, I would hope, between the two, because they're going to be together for the next 4 years. The president's the president. He won the election, but the Republicans won the House and, frankly, are not likely to lose it at a midterm election in the second-term presidency. So John Boehner's apt to be Speaker for 4 years. Hopefully, this is the beginning of a really good, productive relationship.
You made some news last week when you said...
Unintentionally.
Unintentionally. When you said that Republicans should agree with the president, go ahead and extend the tax cuts for 98% of Americans and fight later on for extending those tax cuts for wealthier Americans. Given what was put out by Speaker Boehner yesterday, does that change your position?
No, not at all. I still think that's the smart thing to do. I think, number one, more important, it's the right thing to do. Look, if the two sides agree that we don't want to raise taxes on 98% of the American people, we should agree, take them out of the line of fire, so to speak. Why should I want them to follow the debate. I want them to be engaged in the debate. I actually think they will come to our side in the debate. But if they're worried in the next 30 days that their taxes are going to go up, if politicians that they don't have a lot of confidence anyway mishandle things, then I think that's what they're going to focus on. And I think this has actually been a Democratic point of leverage in the debate. So my position would be, let's take it off the table. That, by the way, complements both these proposals. It's not in contradiction with them. It does what both sides say they could do. So to me, it's still the sensible way forward, and I hope we will do it.
How many of your Republican colleagues agree with you?
Oh, I have no earthly idea. I'm not trying to do a whip count or anything like that. This whole idea came out actually before Thanksgiving originally. We were having a deputy whip meeting. The chief whip, my friend Kevin McCarthy, solicited everybody's opinion. I think this is the way forward. Then we had a larger discussion with the entire whip team, and you guys are pretty smart about figuring out what goes on around this town. So somebody leaked it out pretty quick, and all of a sudden it becomes a sensation. But it's really, I think, just a tactical question here. It's an important tactical question, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Have you spoken with Speaker Boehner since
Sure,
this news
I speak
was
to him all the
broken?
time. I spent hours with him yesterday in the Republican steering committee. Look, the Speaker and I have a wonderful relationship. He's been very fair to me. He's always open, honest, direct. The Speaker likes to say, look, with me, you know me, what you see is what you get. That's actually true. He gives other people the same privilege. You're allowed to say what you think. And, I've heard all the debates and all the screaming. I haven't heard anything that's changed my mind. I still think this is the right way to go, and happy to defend that.
So because you haven't changed your mind, there was a tweet put out yesterday by a reporter that says Tom Cole will not sign Nancy Pelosi's discharge petition on the middle-income Bush tax cuts, his office tells me.
Absolutely not. I'm a whip. You don't sign the discharge position and take control away from your side. And there wouldn't be enough signatures to do it anyway. I'll point out when Leader Pelosi was Speaker Pelosi, I didn't see any Democrats signing any whip cards or discharge petitions, and certainly never enough to get a bill out in 4 years. And so that's not the right way to do it. But I actually think, the idea makes a lot of sense. It doesn't violate anybody's situation. So hopefully at some point, the two sides will come together. I actually think it would make the rest of the negotiations easier. Let's start on something we agree with. I think each side gets a lot of credit.
Well, so then if you believe that, some might hear you and say, well, it sounds like you're putting your party and politics ahead of what you believe in.
No, I'm not. This is a negotiation between two different sides, and you can't have a lot of people freelancing. Our chief negotiator is the Speaker. And I have enormous confidence in him. Again, he's come to agreements before. I recognize that. Again, my advice was offered in private. It was leaked in public, so I could thank whoever did that for all the press I've had the last week. But it doesn't change my responsibilities to the conference. And you also can discredit your idea, by undercutting it. And I think right now the discussion of the idea is good. I see more people coming around to it. But I'm not going to allow anybody on the other side to destroy my own credibility with my own team. That's not going to work very well to try and persuade them to move in the direction I think is appropriate.
Okay, so let's get our viewers involved in the conversation. Peter in Lawton, Oklahoma, Democratic caller. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, Congressman.
Hey, Peter, how are you?
Pretty good. I see you're still saying the same things you said at the town hall meeting, that you're for the Ryan budget plan.
Yes, sir, I am.
Yeah. Well, you know what that Ryan budget plan, I've read it, and it's all about eliminating social programs in the country. We all know that back here. But here's my fear. That's you're really not being honest with the people. That's what the deal is. That I think the fiscal cliff is just a big red herring to get rid of social programs. But I've read this out in a lot in Constitution and now the Tulsa World. Also heard it on KSWO. Your district has the shortest lifespan in the country for women, the highest infant mortality rate in the country for children, highest per capita for people without health insurance, and we follow Mississippi. They're ahead of us in that area. I think that's where you're leading the country. If the people of the United States want to see where you and the Republican Party wants to take the country, come and look at your district.
I'd be delighted to have people come look at my district. I think it's a great district. Always like to say it's 14,000 farms and ranches, 2 tremendous military installations. You're right next to one at Fort Sill, the home of the field artillery, 5 colleges and universities, 11 Indian tribes, and about every 10 years or so the best college football team in America. So it's a pretty special place. I would argue with your statistics, but and I do think I broadly reflect what people in my district think. I just won re-election with 68% of the vote, and as you were kind enough to point out, I'm saying exactly the same things today I was saying at town meetings. Having said all that, the idea that the Ryan budget is about getting rid of social programs, I think, is not so. Actually, it's about saving them. These programs are going bankrupt. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security eventually, although it's in much better footing than the other two, all are going to have to be structurally reformed. If the president gets every tax increase that he's asked for, let's just assume he did. I'm not for him, but he's got a very strong position in this negotiating. It wouldn't come close to solving the budgetary problem that we have, particularly if he wants to do, as I know he does, protect 98% of the American people from a tax increase. So, I think you got to work through these things. Republicans had a lot of courage to put the Ryan budget on the table. I've heard a lot of talk in this town. I've very seldom seen people actually put their fingerprints on something that they know is going to be controversial and attack them. We need to see the same kind of courage from the Democrats in terms of entitlement spending. Now, again, the Speaker's moved a long way on revenue. He's done something that most Republicans would have told you before the election they weren't willing to do, they never want to do. He tried to do that in the aborted grand bargain effort in the summer of 2011. So, again, I think we're trying to recognize power's divided here, and we're trying to come to the best deal we can for the American people. But at the end of the day, if you want to solve the budget problem, you can't do it with taxes. You're going to have to do it with reforms.
Speaking of that, that's the first line from this proposal put out by the Speaker's office, $800 billion in tax reform. Cindy on Twitter says reforming the tax code could consume a year or two. How do you get that done in 2 weeks if that's the proposal from Republicans?
Well, it's amazing how fast this place could move when there's an agreement amongst the major partners. And, remember, we're not coming to this discussion with no preceding discussions. There have been many, many months, really a couple of years of negotiations between the administration and the Republican majority in the House. So a lot of what's called scoring, a lot of the pieces are known. And so it's a matter of putting together in some way that, number one, protects and enhances the security and prosperity of the American people, and number two, can draw the political support that we need to do it. And that's a tricky matter, and that's something obviously for the President, the Speaker, and their respective negotiating teams to work out. While they're doing it, again, I would argue let's protect the American people and let the negotiators negotiate where they differ, and not worry. Let's not us worry about where they're on the same side.
Okay, Thomas in Granite Falls, North Carolina, Republican caller. You're on the air with Congressman Tom Cole. Go ahead.
Mr. Cole.
Yes, sir.
This question of the rich paying their fair share, the Democrats say that 63% of the American people voted for that. Of course, in this freeloading country, I was surprised it wasn't higher than that. It want somebody else to pay their bills. But I saw President Obama on TV about a month or so before the election saying he wasn't concerned about the deficit. But I have a question to ask for you.
Yes, sir.
I've been wondering, does all these people on Medicaid that Obama put on Medicaid, does that come out of the Medicare program?
Yes, it does. I mean,
thank you.
It certainly does, and it's one of the reasons actually I like the Ryan proposal on Medicaid, which is essentially to block grant the program back to the states. This is not a cut in spending, but we'd limit future increases to population growth and inflation, maybe in +1, something like that. We found the states actually do a better, exactly what we did with welfare in the 1990s, which most people on both sides argue worked well. I mean, you know, the great thing about Paul's proposal is it's not new stuff. A lot of it is stuff that has worked in other contexts before. What's new is he actually had the political courage and skill to put it together in a package that you could pass the House.
Kristen in Alabama on Twitter says the GOP plan is to create a fiscal crisis so that it can privatize Social Security and Medicare.
Absolutely not true. No fiscal crisis. What's creating the fiscal crisis is not dealing with Medicare and Social Security right now. Our aim is to save those programs and expand them for future generations. Right now, everybody that's paying into them is paying in more, honestly, than their parents and grandparents did, and if we don't make some fixes, are going to get considerably less. Social Security in the 2030s, Medicare goes bankrupt sooner than that. So let's just sit down and deal with these things. It's a math problem. It's not, you know, we're not talking about getting rid of the programs. We're talking about strengthening them.
You talk about middle-class Americans and extending the tax cuts for them so that they don't get hurt. The New York Times editorial today on the House GOP proposal says this: raising the Medicare eligibility age hurts working-class Americans unable to work to 67 and is likely to increase health care costs. But when you are simply tossing out random ideas, as Republicans seem to be doing, those kinds of long-term implications don't matter. Monday's offering may simply be intended to show the most conservative Republicans that their leaders fought before the compromises to come. For everyone else, they show a party unwilling to approach the bargaining with responsibility.
You know, with all due respect to the New York Times, I'm not surprised they're somewhat critical of Republicans. They usually don't see the world the way we do, and that's fair enough. But having said that, look, this is a real good faith effort. And, you know, by the way, the 67 figure, that's something the president has raised before and talked about in terms of his side. So let's recognize demographic reality here. You know, we live a lot longer than we used to live.
Just to clarify, you're talking about raising the Medicare eligibility age from 65 to 67.
That's correct.
That's an idea you would support too.
Yeah, I probably would. I mean, again, it's in context with what else did you have out there? We've done that with Social Security. I haven't noticed that we give people a lot of time. It's not like we do it tomorrow. It wouldn't affect anybody on the program, anybody close. But again, we changed the Social Security system when I was in my 30s. It's not a surprise to me that I won't get a check at 65 in the way my dad did, but I'll be very close to 67 before I would be fully eligible for the program. That's fine. I had a lot of time to adjust. These kind of adjustments in those programs, again, ought to be done in a bipartisan sense, just as that change was. They ought to be done over a long period of time, and they ought to be done in ways to protect people. So, you know, again, there's a lot of room here. But at the end of the day, if you don't make some changes, they're going to go broke, and you won't be able to protect them by just raising taxes on the top 2%. It won't generate enough revenue.
Raising the eligibility age, is that all you have to do to fix the problem?
No, I think there's a lot more that you can and should do. Again, you know, I know it'll draw some controversy, but I like the Ryan program, which we do in Medicare Part D already on prescription drug, and has worked pretty well. Premium support, which guarantees you coverage, and in the new Ryan budget, also Medicare as an option for you to choose, lets you bargain, lets you get a better rate and a better set of benefits, but puts the individual in control of their own health care to some degree. But again, there's a variety of things. The president's put out, $300 billion plus of Medicare cuts and reforms. I haven't seen how specific those proposals are, but it does suggest he recognizes too there needs to be some changes in these programs. So people that are just saying no, absolutely no change in Medicare, no change in Medicaid, no change in Social Security, I think the negotiators have already passed them by. They certainly have on Medicare.
Hear from Robert next. Petersburg, Virginia, independent caller.
Hey, Robert.
Good morning.
Morning.
You know, I don't hear people talking about other ways of raising revenue and being like the oil companies. You know, I think one of the biggest things that's killing the economy is the high fuel prices. And, but the profits for the oil companies are just up there so big, you got to say to yourself, well, how come they can't take a little bit less so that the rest of the country can get, back up on its feet?
Well, first of all, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. If you look at a percentage of investment, the exploration production of energy, which my state is very heavily involved in, is a very expensive item, and their profits are 5 to 8% on what they actually invest. Microsoft and Intel are much more profitable. By the way, pay much less in taxes as a percentage of their total revenue. Again, people always focus on gas prices. Look at your heating bill lately. That natural gas boom has brought down the price of natural gas, which is about 80% of what we produce in terms of hydrocarbons in my state. It's about a quarter of what it was 3 years ago. That, by the way, is a good deal for the American people. That's a wonderful thing. It's actually bringing industry back. So this industry, which is so often vilified, is quite frankly the one that's generating more jobs, more income, more opportunity than almost any other sector, and is not as profitable as, for instance, high tech.
Nelson in Colorado Springs, Democratic caller.
Good morning, Representative Cole.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think that the Bush tax cut, myself personally, should left to expire. Have anyone ever just try to calculate the amount of money that the economy lost when the tax cuts were put in place? If only 2% of the rich, but you can't continue to pay the same bills with the same less money. And also, with bringing the soldiers home, we are paying out money for the contractors and all this other good stuff. That would also bring down the deficit. But your congressmen, I don't know exactly how much money you're making, so you have to vote against your check with the tax increase.
Okay. Congressman?
Well, you covered a lot of great ground there. First of all, you'll be happy to know Congress hadn't had a pay raise in 5 years, certainly hadn't deserved one. I'm not arguing that it should, and we actually cut congressional budgets the last 2 years in a row by a total of about 11%. So if you're going to ask people to make sacrifices, you got to make some yourself. And I think particularly under Speaker Boehner, Republicans have done that in the House. We haven't seen much of that in the Senate, unfortunately, although on the pay front we have. In terms of saving money on defense, you're right, and by the way, we are. The two sides actually agreed to over $500 billion over a decade in defense cuts. Now, people always say, is this funny money? Is it real? And this is not something I'm in favor of, because I think we live in a very dangerous world. But we have 565,000 person army today. It's going to be 490,000 within 5 years. So that's 75,000 soldiers. We have 220,000 Marines today. You're going to have 200,000 of them in 5 years. We wanted to have in 5 years 313 combat vessels. We're going to have 288. So this is real reduction, not just in bringing people home, but in the size and the capability of the force. And I think our Secretary of Defense, obviously Secretary Panetta is a Democrat, not a Republican, would tell you we've gone as far in this direction as we can safely go. And I actually think both sides, not every member of Congress, but I think the President is Commander-in-Chief in a very dangerous world. I don't think he wants military capability lower, and I know certainly on our side of the aisle we don't. So I think we've saved about as much there as we possibly can. In terms of, again, some of the other things, remember, after the Bush tax cuts came in 2003, and revenue is considerably higher than it was in 2003. It generated a lot of growth. And the deficit, by the way, as recently as 2006, the last Republican majority leaving office, was $167 billion. Our problem is a spending problem. Our problem is we're spending a lot more than we were only 2 or 3 or 4 years ago when the president came into office. Our problem is we've continued to put off dealing with our entitlement programs, and demographically, so our population age, we're going to double the number of people on Medicare in the next 20 years. So we should focus, I think, first and foremost where the problems are. And it's not on the revenue side of this picture. It's on the spending and the entitlement side.
Joseph Ramirez disagrees with you on Twitter. He says, Representative Cole, if we restore the Clinton tax rates today, then in 10 years, 2022, we have the deficit debt where it should be. True?
Well, let's talk about that. No, because I don't think we'll have checked the spending. But he's certainly correct that it generated a great deal more revenue. Now, if we did that, let's take a person, family of 4, making $50,000. That's a $2,000 tax increase for them. And again, I don't think the president wants to do that. Matter of fact, he said he doesn't want to do that. Our side doesn't want to do that. Going back to the Clinton tax rates, and remember, the wealth of the average American family has taken a terrific hit. median household income 4 years ago when the president became president was around $54,000 a year. It's about 50 now. So this portion of our population, which is most of us, has gotten squeezed pretty tremendously. I don't think adding an extra taxes on the top of 98% is going to, number one, be very helpful to them or helpful to economic growth. And number two, it's just, how much do you want folks to bear? So I think, again, freezing those tax rates for the overwhelming majority of Americans is a smart thing to do. We ought to do it. And actually, both sides say they want to.
And you've said then fight later on for the
the fight would start the next day.
Okay.
I mean,
that's what I'm wondering.
I think, again, we could do what I'm talking about, and the negotiations that are underway right now could continue.
Okay.
And they should, and because, again, doing what I'm talking about doesn't violate what either side's fighting over. They actually both say this is something we want to do. So, again, why not make sure that we don't have some last-minute failure at the end of December?
Well, what gives you confidence that Democrats would later on agree to extending the tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans?
Well, this is where I guess I disagree with some of my fellow Republicans. They seem to think the American people are a leverage in this debate. Number one, we should never use the American people as leverage. But number two, it's the Democrats' leverage. They're the ones talking about, if this doesn't get done, everybody's taxes are going to go up. Let's solve that problem for 98% of the people. Our leverage is in the spending and in the entitlement issues. Look, the president and his negotiators are very smart and able people, and they know that the revenue that they're talking about won't come close to fixing the long-term fiscal solvency. So, again, let's take this out. Let's fight. And we're not, again, the president campaigned on an $800 billion increase, which has magically morphed into $1.6 trillion in the last 3 weeks. We could essentially say, the speaker's already put that $800 billion back on the table. We can argue over how to do it. I actually think our way, not raising rates, is much superior. But at the end of the month, these rates all expire, and that's something my side seems to forget. It's not by holding fast doesn't keep the taxes from going up. It just makes them go up on everybody. So there's going to take a proactive measure by the House, the Senate, and the President, both different parties, to actually get something done. And we can do it in pieces. This would be a big piece that would take a big amount of worry off the minds of the American people.
What are the odds we go over the so-called fiscal cliff?
Well, I'm an optimist. It's the Christmas season, so I don't think we will. But anytime you wait to the last minute to do something, then something can go wrong. We got right to the last minute before what could have been a government shutdown in April of 2011. We got the last minute on the fiscal cliff. I don't think it's a good way to do business. It's the way we seem to be doing business in this town right now.
If we were to go over, what happens?
Well, I think probably Congress would be back in session pretty quickly, and hopefully we would do something like I'm talking about right now, and that's why we should do it early, and continue to negotiate. But, it's not just a question of dollars and cents, and I've heard some people say, well, we could let the rates go up, and then the Republicans could get some of them down, and they could call that a tax cut. People will lose faith in the institution and in their political leadership. And trust is a very funny commodity. You have it until you don't. And when you lose the trust of the American people, it's not like you'll get it back by doing the right thing the next day. So we should convince the country and the markets and the world, look, America can govern itself. It can make smart decisions, tough compromises. And I think, again, this would be a step in the right direction of showing we can work together. We can put the American people first. And, again, we've got differences. We can continue to fight over things without putting them in harm's way.
Roger Altman, a former U.S. Deputy Treasurer, writes today in the Financial Times why the fiscal cliff will be averted. And he said one reason is because capital markets will make members of Congress react and do something. It's a powerful force, he writes, on earth, repeatedly forcing outcomes which political processes cannot.
Well, I think there's something to what he says. We certainly saw that during the TARP controversy. There's nothing like a 1,000-point drop in the stock market, which, by the way, whether you think you're in it or not, you are, because your job prospects, your retirement prospects, everything's tied up. A lot of people have investments in the markets without even realizing it. So, again, I would agree very much with what he has to say, but why do we have to wait that long? I mean, again, I think the markets, we're about one really big or two big deals away from really reigniting economic growth in this country. There's a lot of things out there, and I don't care which side of the political divide you're on, we're all better off when the economy's growing and when there's opportunities for Americans. And this is something, if we can make a good deal, a smart deal, a wise deal that calls for compromise on each side, then I think we can actually help the economy by showing the political system can function.
Gerald Rich on Twitter. How about getting rid of subsidies for farmers, corporations, and big oil?
Well, if you actually look at the Republican Farm Bill that has actually, with bipartisan support, come out, it gets rid of direct payments for farmers, but it also, asks for some reforms on the other side. The food stamp use is up like 47 or 8% in 2 years in the country in the middle of what's supposed to be a recovery. 41 states had more food stamp expenditures last year than the year before, again, when the economy was getting better. So, I think there's things to be had on both sides of this. In terms of subsidies for the oil companies, really there is no, it's not like they get a check. They get the same kind of deduction that manufacturing do, except since they're a different kind of business, it's done called intangible drilling and depletion allowance, and that's one of the things that's encouraged oil production in the United States. You don't get those breaks overseas. So encouraging production here, which creates jobs and energy independence, is a smart thing. Now, I suspect those things are on the table when you get into discussions about loopholes and whatever, but the big loopholes and the big deductions are things like home mortgage, no taxes on health insurance, charitable giving. Those are by far the three biggest, and how you would deal with those three, that's going to be an interesting debate. Okay.
John in Hampton, Georgia, independent caller.
Hey, John.
John, are you with us? John in Hampton, Georgia. One last time. John, all right, moving on to James in Frankfort, Kentucky, Republican caller there. Go ahead.
Hey, James.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to know why the politicians don't get out and see what is going on, and all of these people on disability and this young generation like sitting up in the porch smoking a cigarette, and 2 miles down the road there's a sign outside the road wanting to hire people. Then you go there and check, and the guys won't work. They have to get Mexicans that's not legally over here to work, and the government paying the house and the kids and all this time. The government got out of the business of supporting kids.
Okay. Congressman?
Well, again, you cover a lot of territory there. Look, I'm a very conservative Republican. I believe government should do as little as possible, and we should reduce it as much as possible. Having said that, there are legitimate cases where people need help. And particularly, children who, through no fault of their own, are in difficult circumstances. I think there is an obligation there. So the question here is the right kind of balance. But if you're saying overall is the government doing too much, yeah, I'd say that it probably is. But I'm not saying that everything needs to be rooted out and taken away. But it does need to be looked at. When you're running trillion-dollar deficits, you're going to have to make some hard decisions. And we can't get there on revenue alone, no matter what the president says. So spending restraint, entitlement reform has got to be a component of any kind of lasting deal.
We'll go up to Danvers, Massachusetts. Susan is watching us up there, Democratic caller.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I guess my most important concern is one of the details in the Ryan budget that I had learned about on NPR about a month ago, and that is an $800 billion cut to Medicaid over 10 years, which my understanding is that two-thirds of the money spent on Medicaid are people in nursing homes. These are the elderly in nursing homes and the disabled, and it seems like be quite a draconian kind of an approach if we were to take that kind of money out of a population that, what is their crime? That they got old? That they became disabled? I mean, we're in this position because life expectancy has increased. And, that's no fault of our own.
Okay, Susan, let's get a response from the Congress.
Well, first of all, I think this is where Washington language gets in the way of really being, looking at the thing rationally. There's nothing in the Ryan budget that calls for, quote, cuts. It just says we're not going to increase as much as it's projected to do. We're going to find savings and do things. And by the way, remember the president in his opening proposal in this discussion has talked about $350 billion worth of, quote, cuts in Medicare. They're really not cuts. They're just not going to raise it as rapidly as it's growing. It's growing much faster than the population, much faster than inflation. So again, it's not as if we're not going to continue to spend money. And in the Ryan budget on the Medicaid portion, which your caller was specifically referring to, it simply block grants it to the states, which run the programs right now. And by the way, continues to increase the amount of money going every year to the states by inflation plus a little bit and population growth. So Paul's never talked about cutting things, but he has talking about moving the growth rate to something sustainable. Because right now, believe me, these programs are going to be bankrupt in a decade if we don't do something. And you can't just willy-nilly raise the taxes to cover it. There's not enough money.
Doug Seeger on Twitter says capital gains could be taxed the same as income from work, including being taxed for Social Security and Medicare.
Well, I disagree with that. First of all, you want to get people to invest. And second, we can debate what the capital gains rate is, but it's not the same as a salary. When you make an investment, you don't know if you're going to make money or lose money. And by the way, you get to deduct almost nothing when you lose money. It's like $3,000 a year. You need to keep people investing. Now, what the appropriate rate is, I think that's a matter of a good discussion and worth having. But as a rule, the lower the rate, the better for investment, the better for job growth. In terms of Medicare and Medicaid, you're going to see for upper income under Obamacare that's already been done. If you're going to make over $250,000 a year, you're going to pay a tax that flows in to fund that thing. And I think that's the other thing people forget. The president. Democrats added in his first 2 years an enormously new program. It's, by the way, got $1 trillion of taxes of its own, or $600 billion actually, over a decade that are going to start, and they're beginning to kick in now. You go to your tanning salon, you got an extra 10%. You're going to buy a wheelchair, there's going to be a device tax on that. So there's a lot of taxes coming. And if you're a high-income investor, you're already going to get hit with taxes to fund the president's health care proposal.
And are those included on any budget proposals put out?
Yeah, I think they are. We think some of these things ought to be open for negotiation and review. But look, we lost the election. The president's still there, so he's not going to do a full repeal. Having said that, there have been areas that we've worked on before. Both sides came together. It was actually a Republican plan to get rid of these 1099 forms that were going to kill a lot of small businesses. Democrats looked at it and said, we probably did overreach there. That was a dumb idea. And we got that repealed. The president signed it. So we're going to continue to try and work, but this thing is a backbreaker fiscally for the country over the next decade, and that's going to become progressively more apparent. Okay,
Linda in Naples, Florida, independent caller. You're on the air with Congressman Tom Cole.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just have a question. I don't understand how you guys do a budget. I mean, we've done household budgets, and Medicare and Social Security would equate my mortgage and health care. Everything else gets cut 10%. No movies, food gets cut. I don't understand why you start at the top, which is going to hurt the most people, and then blackmail them. I mean, you're talking about seniors, you're talking about people who paid in their whole life, and this is always what you go to cut. Now, I understand it's a big chunk of the payment, but if you cut everything else 10%, doesn't that make up for a lot of it? And also, my other question was, I mean, maybe Congress and the Senate should be paid by what they do instead of just a straight salary and all your benefits, because if you got paid piecework like some people get paid, you would have no salary.
Okay.
Well, I like the idea of pay for performance, so that's not a problem to me. As a matter of fact, the Senate hasn't produced, under Democratic leadership, a budget in 3 years. So your point about how do you budget in the Senate, they just simply don't. They haven't had the courage to do it. That doesn't, by the way, take 60 votes. It just takes 51. They got plenty of votes. They could go do one. Let's see if Senator Reid actually produces one next year as we move into the fourth year. The Republicans, since they've been in power in the House, have produced a budget. You may not like the budget. That's fair. But they've actually had the courage to write it, put it out, and vote on it so they can be held accountable back home. To your point about why do you start with Medicare and Social Security, number one, I would argue we don't. It's actually the last place that politicians want to go, not the first place. And we have been doing some cuts in other areas. I mentioned earlier in the show, we've done over $500 billion in defense. Now, some people think, oh, that's wonderful, we got too much defense. I have a different view of that, but we're going to have fewer soldiers, fewer ships, fewer planes. That's already happening. We spent less on defense this year than the year before. Some of those savings are just simply bringing troops home, but the others are real cuts in capability. And, an Army is one of those things that, you don't like to pay for it, but when you need it, you can't produce it overnight. So, there are cuts there. There have been a lot of other cuts in domestic programs, but the drivers of the debt are health care, not Social Security so much. Social Security actually, some of the Democrats argue that should be done in a separate process. I think there's probably some merit in that suggestion. We should, set out a framework where those negotiations can begin, because it will go broke. But this is demographic reality. While you say people have paid into it, people draw out of the programs more than they pay in. The average, couple over a lifetime will spend $119,000 in Medicare taxes and draw out about $340,000 in benefits. You can't do that indefinitely, particularly when that population is exploding, and it is and will as the baby boomers retire in the next generation.
On the defense cuts to come under sequestration, those automatic spending cuts, does the GOP proposal from the House address that?
Yes,
take it away?
Yeah, and again, this is something that both sides think. Sequestration is not a good deal. It's not a smart way to cut. It's just across the board. You might want to actually do more of some things and less of other things, so to speak, that are less essential. Number two, it's very heavy-handed, and it's on top of $500 billion in defense cuts that we've already made. So this now moves to $1 trillion worth of defense, and you're going to lose another 100,000 people in your Army, for instance, that's already dropping, and you just can't sustain the defense. And believe me, nothing is more expensive than war. War in the Middle East triples the price of oil overnight, those kinds of things. A strong America, I think, is pretty important. Not only to discourage an attack on us, but to maintain stability around the world. But again, for the people that think we need to cut those, they're being cut. But you still can't get there without dealing with these other matters. And you're not talking, by the way, about affecting anybody on any of these programs now. You're not talking about anybody close to them. You're doing exactly what Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan, and Howard Baker did in 1983. You're saying, we're going to change the nature of Social Security. We're going to phase it in so gradually people won't feel it, and it'll make it solve it. And we were much closer to Social Security going broke in 1983 than we are today. They did their job. They extended the program. We need to do the same thing now.
One last phone call here for
Sure.
you, Congressman. Rose in Fall River, Massachusetts, independent caller. Hi, Rose.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
I have, first of all, I have a comment. I am on SSDI, and I pay into Medicare. You talk about that Medicare got no cuts, okay? How come in 2011 I lost my eye benefit and my hearing aid benefit? I had to pay for both. My hearing aid cost me $825, okay? I pay $93 a month for Medicare. I pay 15% of my prescription costs. Plus I pay, and now it's $11.40 a month for my IRS plan. So when you want to take, why don't you take from yourself?
Congressman?
Well, great point. First of all, we've cut congressional budgets, and that's an appropriate thing to do. And I'm sure we'll look at trying to do it again. It's hard always to address an individual case because you don't know what the circumstances are. If you look at the total budget in these programs, they don't go down, they go up. We're not spending less on any of these programs than we were a few years ago. Part of that is, again, we're beginning, the first edges of the baby boom are moving into this. Now, nobody has a reform proposal on either side of the aisle that's on the table that would threaten any benefit that this lady is currently receiving. Nobody wants to do that. But if we don't do some things, these programs go broke, her benefits will be affected, and drastically, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And honestly, I think, to give credit to the other side, so are they. We're trying to reach some sustainable way to protect these programs.
The House GOP proposal, though, does include $200 billion in savings by adjusting the cost of living index, which could impact Social Security benefits.
It could, but not immediately, and probably for upper income people. This has actually not been a new idea. It's been around for many, many years. It's called progressive indexation. That is, where you don't, hit people that are at the lower and middle income level. But look, Warren Buffett probably doesn't need exactly the same benefit adjustment to his Social Security if he even takes a check. I have no earthly idea if he does or not. But that somebody that's making, that is literally living on their Social Security and making $20,000. So these kind of adjustments, they're going to hit higher income people. And most of the Republican proposals have actually called for the wealthy to pay more on their Medicare and Medicaid.
Do you think politically...
Or Medicare, not Medicaid. They're not on Medicaid.
Do you think politically that idea survives in these negotiations?
I think it does because, honestly, we did it in Medicare Part D. I think the Democrats see the fairness, if you will. People that can pay more should pay more in order that we can sustain these programs. And that hits, by the way, upper income. Most of the loophole, discussion that we're talking about now, guess what? People that take deductions have money, pay taxes. They're usually at the upper end of these things. So I think Republicans have been quite willing to go after that constituency. In some way, Democrat resistance on all entitlement spending, protects people getting these kind of payments that clearly don't need them or don't need them to the degree that the lady on the call, for instance, did.
We're doing a series here on the Washington Journal in our last half of the program looking at different policy areas of the Fiscal Cliff talks. Today we're talking about the alternative minimum tax. Help us set that up.
Well, it's something that was passed, if I recall correctly, in the 1960s. The idea was to aim at a very small group of very high income individuals that were not paying any taxes. It did not have an inflation adjustment in it, and so now the group has grown enormously. And we assume, in a budgeting sense, the way we budget, the lady's right, is arcane, that this revenue is going to come in after a certain date. Well, it's not going to come in because if we now allowed this tax to kick in, it would hit literally tens of millions of Americans. So we, quote, fix it. But now I would hope in the next year, when we get into longer talks, we can have a permanent fix to AMT to get it out of the budgetary magic. Same thing with what's called SGR, the sustainable growth rate, on how we pay Medicare, Medicaid. We patch these things over. We're never going to charge it. Let's figure out a way to get it out of the budgeting process, and so the numbers can be something we can understand and actually, project forward realistically.
Is this a big deal?
Yeah, it is. If we were to not get it done, it would be a big deal. I mean, we would raise the taxes on millions of Americans overnight. They wouldn't even know it was coming. This is one of those things that they don't think about because we've never let it happen. But it's sort of like the sword of Damocles. It's over their head. And if we don't fix it and hopefully not just patch it but get rid of it, then you run the risk of a major tax increase on people that we would all, that make $75,000. These are we're not talking about the super rich here. We're talking about, pretty average people.
Well, you heard it from the congressman. It's over many people's heads. Don't know it's coming. So hopefully we'll answer many of those questions coming up next. Congressman Tom Cole, thank you.
Thank you.